My name is Eamon Hotep Parker, and I'm your host this Thursday, March 16th at 11 o'clock. So, today we'll be interviewing this guy right here, Akil Parker, I'm sorry. Um, he's with the All That Math LLC. It's a terrific program for youth, in regards to tutoring and math and history. Mr. Parker has combined both subjects to give, students a better insight in regards to their culture and keep their math skills up at the same time. So we're definitely looking forward to hearing from him. Um, Wanted to give you guys a little information in regards to a situation that happened today. Well, not today, a couple days ago. A woman was struck by a car, 58th and Lancaster. Miss, Doreen Gaston. Excuse me. It was a hit and run. It was 49th and Lancaster at a real popular intersection. Miss Gadsden had just gotten off of work and was doing a regular routine of getting some takeout food when she was struck a little while, after that, a little while after getting her food or whatever. So if anybody has any information in regards excuse me, to this crime, please contact the police or you email us at elzfnd@outlook.com, and we'll definitely pass this information along to help her family get justice in regards to this situation. Just a little bit about the organization. This is the Ethel Zachary Foundation. Excuse me. I got a little tickle in my throat. So we educate and cultivate inner city youth. We want to give these youth to help them see the opportunities they have to having a brighter future. We don't want them to think that they just have to be subject in regards to the same crimes that we see every day and the nonsense that's just happening every day within the inner city streets. So we want these kids to have hope, and so like I said, they can see the opportunities that they have to have a brighter future. When a lot of people think of inner city children, they see the kids that's normally on TV doing violent crimes or things like that. Well, some people may think that, but all children are not like that in the inner city. So, like I said, we definitely want to help these children to see who they are as a person and the importance of education. So, without further ado, we're going to bring on Mr. Parker. Let me see here. Mr. Parker, how are you, sir?
Let me see. Oh, my apologies. My mic was muted. I hate when that happens.
So how was your day today?
I had an excellent day today, actually. Yeah, got a lot of work done. Did some outreach, did some networking, did some teaching, some tutoring. Got some exercise this morning. It's always good.
Wonderful. First of all, I want to thank you for coming on to our show, sharing this program that you have designed for youth. I'm sure it's been phenomenal, and we just want to pick your brain and see, what made you go in this direction in regards to education. So, what made you get involved in education?
In education, well, originally I got involved in education for a couple of reasons. I wanted to be a positive influence in the community, in the Black community of which I'm a part of. I also had a baby on the way, so I needed financial resources to support this baby that I had on the way back in 2005. And I also didn't want to be one of those adults that only complains about what the youth are doing without having, skin in the game and, boots on the ground, so to speak, and actually being in community with the youth to try to guide them in a more positive direction. As you alluded to, with a lot of the news media and mainstream media, which majority covers a lot of the negative aspects of youth existence. We see that all the time. So I wanted to be a person that was providing like a positive impact on the youth. So that's why I originally got involved in education, in the first place. Now why I stayed, that's another question too. Because a lot of people, they don't really stay that long. They're in and out. Teacher burnout is a real thing. But I think the reason that I stayed, even though I changed the capacity and the type of education that I was involved in, the type of educator I was, changed over time, was because I started doing a lot of reading. And I think about that. I believe it's a quote from the late Lerone Bennett Jr., where he speaks of how a teacher can either be a liberator or a tyrant.
Right.
And, a lot of reading I was doing about Africa, African history, African American history, the African American experience, from a lot of African-centered scholars, led me to see even much deeper the importance of education, and not just schooling, but actual education, So that's why I stayed involved in education, because I realized, especially as a math teacher, I started to realize how important my role was, in the STEM disciplines.
Okay. Now you mentioned a term, teacher burnout. I hear that a lot. I'm not sure, how familiar everybody else may be with that. Could you, kind of break it down for us?
I think teacher burnout is a general term used to describe when teachers overall become physically tired, emotionally tired, spiritually tired, and they really can't handle the day in and day out responsibilities and aspects of being in the classroom. A lot of it affects a lot of people's mental health, it affects a lot of people's physical health, and it's a serious issue. I mean, you can burn out from any profession. If you're not if you're not getting enough rest, if you're not getting enough support, if you're not getting enough positive energy. Also, I think another reason I never really experienced burnout was because of the relationships and the rapport that I developed, not even with the adults in the buildings that I worked in, because I had some positive relationships with some adults, but mainly I had positive relationships with my students. So my classrooms were always a community. A lot of times, to the extent that a lot of the other adults in the building didn't like the fact that I had these positive relationships with my students. Some of them even resented it, but I didn't let that stop me, because I knew what I was there for. I worked for them. I worked for the students.
Right. So from your perspective, what is education to you?
Education is a couple of things. I like to look at it as, the late Dr. John Henry Clark described it as training people and young children to be responsible handlers of power, because, power is a very important thing. A lot of times power is often overlooked in a lot of our conversations and discussions when we address the issues in our community, because we're not ever addressing the power discrepancy and the power differential. A lot of times we're just trying to advocate for those that are in power to just be nicer to us, for those that are in power to just treat us better, just, stop killing us or stop doing this. But we don't address the fundamental issue, which is the power imbalance, because those groups that are able to do those things to us are only able to do those things to us because they have the power. They have more power than we do. Also, it's an issue. I think about Dr. King, and Dr. King talked about, character development as well as intellectual development,
right,
as another definition of education. And also, last but not least, I would say, developing the ability within people to solve their own problems.
Uh-huh.
That should be the true measure of education. You have to be able to solve your own problems, not other people's problems for a paycheck, but be able to solve your own problems. Because if you can't solve your own problems, then your problems will just persist, and the problems, your individual problems will persist, and the problems in your communities will persist as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Education definitely is power. Um, I just don't see that a lot of, well, I can't say a lot because I don't have like, a statistic on that, but it's just some individuals in the community that just doesn't see that. I think in our society, they think more money being a power tool than definitely education. So coming up in the inner city, well, your community, um, what were some dangers that you've witnessed in regards to education?
In regards to education, so like, what do you mean specifically by that? Like within schools, or within school settings, or within education policy? What did you mean specifically by that?
Um, I guess we can go with the policies in regards to how they affect the schools, and then the effects that I guess a negative impact would have when education is brought forth wrong towards students.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of things. One of the things that I witnessed more recently, since I've been an educator in Philadelphia, I didn't grow up in Philadelphia. I grew up in a city which is kind of like a smaller version of Philadelphia, which is Baltimore, Maryland, which has a lot of the same problems, a lot of the same type of issues, the same types of positive aspects as well as Philly has, because Philly's not all bad. No place is all bad, but
Right.
I would say, since I've been an educator and an adult in Philadelphia, school closures have been a persistent thing. Teacher shortages have been a persistent thing. However, while those are negatives, at the same time, it gives us as a community an opportunity to take more control and more ownership over the education of our children. Because what it should do is force us into doing that, and for us to think about how we can create independent educational spaces for our children and for our young people, so that we can take that responsibility, as opposed to using all of our energy, or a lot of our energy, kind of just complaining about the fact that the Philadelphia school district decided to do this or decided to do that, or they're not going to do this or they're not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because even these decisions that are being made, they're not new decisions. Like, these types of decisions were being made in the 1980s and the 1970s and the
Right.
1960s. So, if you're ahistorical, then you might think that there's something new under the sun, but there's really nothing new under the sun. It's actually very consistent in terms of how education policymakers and government entities have treated the education of our people. I would say another very significant danger that is hardly ever discussed, is the inequity in education, informal education, and informal schooling, and myself being a recipient of and a benefactor of a lot of that inequity, because growing up in Baltimore, as I said, Baltimore is very similar to Philadelphia. There's a handful of special admission magnet middle schools, special admission magnet high schools that the so-called the so-called smart kids are supposed to be able to go to. While everybody else goes to the comprehensive schools or the neighborhood schools. And it's the same situation in Philadelphia. And what happens is, what you realize when you get older, when you become more politically aware and more politically mature, is that in and of itself is one of the greatest tools to maintain inequality and to maintain
Mm-hmm.
poverty. Because what you actually do, the schools are actually utilized as a vehicle for the maintenance of neo-colonialism, right?
Right.
So you have the so-called, you have these black people like myself that are educated or schooled in a certain way and trained in a certain way, with the goal of the school to train you and develop you to be, as Amos Wilson eloquently put, to be the black face of white power. For lack of a better way to say it. I mean, that's the best way to say it, to be the black face of white power. Now, if you're able to escape from that, then more power to you. But a lot of us don't even realize that that's what's going on. Just kind of like, I had a former student one time that told me that, a fish doesn't know that it's wet. which is very true. I thought that was very profound when this former student told me that. So a lot of people, were in these systems and were being developed in certain ways, and we don't even understand what the end goal is for us and what the end goal of those that are in power, as I mentioned earlier, what they have for us, right? So that's a major issue. Like the fact that, and it's not just about the training. The training can be quality, right? I think I've received a quality education to a certain degree at the schools that I attended. But while I was in those schools, I was never taught or influenced to try to take control of my community. I was only influenced to try to assimilate or integrate into the existing community that is controlled by white folks, but never to take control of the community and to create independent spaces or independent communities that are controlled politically, economically, and culturally, as Malcolm X talked about in his Battle of the Bullet speech in 1964, by Black people, right? So we were never taught to do that. But it's okay because, I guess it's okay because, that's what I'm trying to do now. So, I'm still on that path, but so many of us are not. So what I say is, like, one of the things that is very dangerous that doesn't get discussed enough is in education is the so-called good schools, I guess. I actually wrote an essay about this about maybe 5 to 10 years ago, so-called good schools, because I want us to, as a community, I want us to start thinking about, like, what defines a good school, what makes a school a good school. Because even if, if there's academic rigor, that's important, right? We should have that. And I'm not even saying that people shouldn't send their children to, the Centrals or the Girls Highs or the Mastermans maybe, or the George Washington Carvers or whatever. But we also should understand that if you're going to be more politically nationalist, so to speak, I mean, it's nice and it's cute to wear, Malcolm X t-shirts and Malcolm X hoodies and everything. But if you're doing that while still promoting a political ideology that he was very much against, then something's not right. So, and I think that, again, it's because a lot of us, they may not have studied, these different political ideologies and, political outlooks. So they don't really even know, and a lot of it is just cosmetic and it becomes cosplay. But, if you're going into sending your children into those schools and going to those schools for the academic training and for the academic development, but then the goal is not to assimilate into the current society, but to build a new society and build a different society that your own people control. And I think that's very different than what the goal of the people at the Board of Education or the school district in the city where you live, what their goal is.
All right. Now you mentioned something about the good schools. Now that's interesting to me because the schools that you actually mentioned, from my point of view, I thought they were good schools. Can you kind of, explain that a little bit more for us?
Well, the thing is, like, I posed the question because it kind of goes without saying that certain schools have a certain reputation for being good, but I think we should question that, and we should interrogate that more deeply in terms of, like, what defines a good school. Like, and also a lot of times we should do a balanced critique, because even if I speak to some of the negative aspects of these spaces and about the, a lot of the racism and the Eurocentrism that they're grounded in, and a lot of the cultural violence that takes place in these spaces, as I said, we have to be balanced, because at the same time, while, you're going to go there and you're going to study math and study science, but while you're studying math and science, as an example, you're going to be subliminally taught through the culture of the institution that African people had nothing to do with math or science, right? That's just what it is. That's what's going to happen. But you're still going to get that academic exposure. That academic exposure can be valuable if you're already grounded culturally, like in your household and from your parents or your grandparents or from community members or from your old heads, if they've already let you know that, well, look, when you get to high school, in 10th grade, you're going to take geometry. They're going to teach you the Pythagorean theorem. Pythagoras was a Greek. He was a white man. But you need to understand that he studied in ancient Kemet, for 22 years. So that's where he got that formula from, right? So if you have old heads that are already telling you this, then that cultural violence is really not as dangerous to you because you're kind of defended against it. But the
Right.
issue becomes so many of us don't have that defense. So many of us are not, they kind of not like, vaccinated, so to speak, as you will,
Mm-hmm.
if you will, against that type of, cultural assault, right? They're just basically taught that, these other people, created all these things, discovered all these things. These other people are superior academically and intellectually, and their intellectual tradition is far superior to the intellectual tradition of your people. In fact, your people don't even have an intellectual tradition. All your people do is dance and sing, eat fried chicken, and look nice and look cool and play sports. That's all y'all really do, because that's what's exposed in the mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
right? And even when we talk about Black History Month, I think Black History Month has been misappropriated because the way it's often celebrated or recognized is not the way that Dr. Carter G. Woodson intended for it to be celebrated or recognized. It really wasn't a celebration at all. It really was more of a moment that week he designated, which later grew into a month, which is fine, was meant to be a time of reflection on
Right.
constant work, 12-month out of the year, perennial work, right? So reflecting on what we've accomplished, what we've learned, the history that we've unearthed and been able to teach to our own children in the past 12 months, and what we're going to do in the next 12 months, as
Right.
opposed to let's just fixate and focus on the first Black person to do this thing in this white
Mm-hmm.
controlled company or this white controlled space. Let's
Right.
just talk about all these first Black people to do this, because that's really just it's meant to speak to our self-esteem and our ego and make us feel good about being accepted,
Mm-hmm.
by a larger group that is more powerful than us, that really is not concerned about our well-being. So when we think about good schools, I just think we have to interrogate that. We have to question what makes it good,
Right.
because
In
a lot of
regards
times when we
to
say things are good, we think it's all good, you
mm-hmm.
know, but it's not all good, right? Just like some of the more poorly performing schools, we may say, well, that's a bad school, because a lot of us would say, maybe not in public, but among our friends, or maybe we're out at the bar or whatever, or we just know in the back of our mind, okay, that school, ride past a certain school in Philly, that's a bad school. Because you know why? Because you don't want your children to go there. And I get it, because there's a lot of schools in Philly I don't want my children to go to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just being honest, but I know why that is. But at the same time, those schools do have some value. But what I need for my children to do is go to certain schools where they can get certain academic rigor to supplement what I'm already giving them, right? Um, but every parent doesn't have that ability to be the primary educator, as
Right.
some of us can.
Yeah, that's very true. The parents definitely have to be more involved, well, more involved with their children's culture, so they can recognize the things that they may not be, being taught at the schools, so they can, substitute that in for themselves, along with the information that the children are getting at these, so-called good schools or bad schools. So tell us about the program, all about math, all this math. I'm sorry.
So all this math, it started out as a private tutoring company in 2017, and it's grown. It's grown a lot over the past 6 years. Well, 5.5 years, because it started in June 2017, the end of that school year. And so we do a lot of private tutoring. My son also works with me. He's a tutor also. He's 17 now. He's been tutoring with me for the past 4 years. And we do some educational consulting work. We do professional development. We do teacher coaching. At least that's what I've done over the past few years, on a small scale. But I would like to increase that scale and scale up and whatnot. Um, Also, we have a YouTube channel which is meant to satisfy a need for not only youth to be able to get homework help and test prep and support in math, with their assignments, but it's also for parents. It's also for adults. It's also for grandparents, uncles, aunts, big cousins, whoever. Anybody that has young people that are in school that they care about, and they like to be able to help them with their homework. Because when you really sit back and think about it, in our community, and not just in our community, but in a lot of communities, right? Just in Western society, most adults, I would say, cannot sit down with children and help them with their math homework.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's a certain level of math where they're rendered incapable, right? They could probably go online and do some research, figure some things out. But a lot of people feel as though they don't have the capacity or the ability to do that for various reasons. Now, so what the YouTube channel is meant to do is be able to provide adults, parents with simplified, detailed, thorough lessons that are aligned with the homework that their children are bringing home. Because within the last 5 to 10 years, I've consistently heard a complaint that the new math is a problem. Now, new math is a more of a colloquialism, a term that's used to describe the mathematics that's being taught in elementary schools and in middle schools now. That a lot of us, the methods that are being used now, a lot of us weren't exposed to these methods about 30 years ago or 40 years ago or 25 years ago. So there's a lot of frustration, like when parents are attempting to help their children with homework, because the methods that they know are not the methods that the children are expected to be practicing with for their homework. And initially what we do is we kind of lash out at the methodology, and we lash out at the school teachers in the schools. And that's understandable, because even when I first was introduced to this Common Core, quote unquote, new math, I didn't really like it, but it required some study, but when I had to really study it, because I teach it to my students at Cheney in my math methods courses. And before that, I taught it to my students at LaSalle University in my math methods courses. I realized that it's actually very helpful for various reasons. One reason is that it's a good, solid preparation for algebra, because I know we've encountered a lot of young children that will say, and even adults, they'll say, I like the math up until they introduced the letters, up until the letters got involved. So what they're saying is they really don't understand algebra, and a lot of the algebraic concepts. But what the so-called new math does is it introduces a lot of those algebraic concepts at a much younger age, right? And the students can handle it if it's introduced in the proper way, right? So it's not as if it's really over their head, but it just has to be introduced in the proper way, and it can be, right? So that's one thing. It also provides multiple methods for solving problems, because you don't want to be, if you got to get home and you only know how to drive home by taking 76, but 76 is backed up and it was an accident and it's rush hour, you might be sitting on 76 for 3 hours. But if you know another route, if you know how to go through the park or go through the city, then you'll get home in a much shorter amount of time. So similar to mathematics, there should be multiple methods to solve different math problems, right? So we should be able to do that. We should be able to have different methods that we can pick and choose and decide based upon how the problems look, that we should, and what's most appropriate in that given situation. We should be able to solve the problems the most efficient way. But we need to know multiple methods, just like we need to know multiple routes to get home.
Right.
In case it's raining, or in case like, the highway is crowded or backed up or whatever, whatever the situation may be. So in math, it's no different. So, I have a lot of content on the YouTube channel that directly addresses that issue, so that, parents say that, they don't like the new math. And I think they don't like the new math because they don't understand it.
Right.
They don't know how to do it. So I said, okay, well, I can create videos where you can learn how to do it. You just got to go to the channel. You just got to go to All This Math on YouTube. The same way, a woman might go to get tips on makeup, how to, put a contour on a certain way or whatever. How a brother might want to learn how to change his own brake pads, so he can save that money from going to the mechanic. And he might not trust the mechanics. Think the mechanic might try to jerk him. So he might go on YouTube and look up a video on how to, take off the wheel and take off the brake pads and remove the calipers and all that type of stuff. In the same way, like, a lot of people use what we call YouTube University. So I've just added the content on there, so our community will not be held back, and our children will be able to learn mathematics and feel comfortable with mathematics and be more engaged in formal education and more engaged in school. And I also have a belief that this could, if done properly, it could curtail a lot of the gun violence that has been receiving a lot of attention in the media, because a lot of the brothers that end up being shooters, you know, once upon a time, they were in second grade and third grade classrooms, sitting around in class, you know, with a lot of learning gaps, and they were behind academically, and the school probably didn't have the resources or, you know, for certain interventions that they needed, you know, and then that compounds every single year. Those learning gaps and those learning deficiencies and those math deficiencies compound every single year, and it becomes a cumulative effect. It's like, you know, you end up in ninth grade in an algebra 1 class somewhere, and you could barely multiply. So then, how you gonna solve equations if you can barely multiply? So if I could barely multiply, then like school really ain't for me. And then people start saying, well, college ain't for me, because ninth grade ain't even for me. So if ninth grade not for me, how's college gonna be for me? So, and I believe that a lot of that comes from a weak foundation in mathematics. Now, it's very popular to say, for a lot of people to say that a lot of crime is the result of a lack of literacy, lack of English language literacy. And I agree with that too. But I think mathematics should be included in that, because, again, when you're in ninth grade and you're like, well, school's not really for me and college is not for me, now what's for me? The streets start to look very seductive. They start to look very attractive. Your peer group and, you know, young black males, it's like, you know, everything around us is like pulling us in that direction. Anyway, the music is telling us that this is the lifestyle, this is cool. And then, you know, a lot of situations you end up in the street, you end up carrying guns. And when you carry a gun, you're very likely to use a gun and shoot somebody. But how did it start? It started from having a weak math background and a weak math foundation. So it starts with a weak math foundation, and that weak math foundation is compounded year after year after year. And then you end up in high school and you're like, okay, well, I don't know math, so I'm not gonna perform in algebra class. I'm not gonna perform in geometry in 10th grade. And then 11th grade, if I take algebra 2, I'm not gonna perform in that class because I didn't even perform in algebra 1. And then, you know, maybe if you take stats in 12th grade, or maybe you have all your math credits because some kind of way you just get by or whatever, or you get a social promotion, so to speak, so you still pass. You're still not, you know, you don't see formal education as a means to achieve your goals and achieve your ends. So again, a lot of the gun violence comes from brothers that felt like, you know, this is my only option. This is my only alternative, right? I mean, there are always exceptions that, you know, this may prove the rule, but what often happens is a lot of young people can embrace delayed gratification because we say, okay, yeah, because we want to make money too. Like the smart kids want to make money too, right? Or quote unquote smart kids want to make money too, right? But if you feel like, well, I can make money by going to college, getting a degree, or if you feel like, well, I can make money by graduating from high school and then starting a business, going entrepreneurial or going to trade school or something like that, then that's what you're going to do. But if you feel like, well, formal schooling is not for me, I can't make money by doing that, and, you know, maybe the street isn't more inviting to me, then that's where you're going to end up. So for a lot of people. So that's why I say that, just as people have been saying that English language literacy is a contributing, or the lack thereof is a contributing factor to crime, mathematics literacy and mathematics proficiency and those levels are also just as much, if not more, contributors to crime. And if you even think further about what mathematics does for you in terms of the skill set that it engenders within you, when you practice mathematics and you understand mathematics and you know how to solve equations and you know how to, you know, simplify expressions and evaluate expressions, what that practice is doing is it's helping you to develop critical thinking ability. It's helping you to develop consequential thinking ability, which are two main components of problem solving skills. And again, back to the crime and gun violence, a lot of the gun violence comes from young brothers reacting emotionally in situations where they're mad and they have no idea of any other alternative in terms of how to resolve this issue. I have an issue, I have a problem, I don't know how to resolve it besides being violent with you. And that's not to say that violence is never the answer, because I'm not of that belief. I believe that sometimes violence is the answer, but violence should only be the answer once you've applied critical thinking ability, considered all the facts, considered all the consequences, and then made a conscientious decision as to whether violence is the appropriate answer based on some type of intellectual exercise. But
Now,
a lot of the young brothers can't do that.
Now, when you say violence is the answer, I mean, what type of violence are you referring to?
Physical violence, violence can be an answer at times. It depends on the situation. I mean, United States military United States government has a military with like a $100 trillion budget. So violence is the answer, right? Sometimes you need to defend yourself. If someone's attacking you,
right.
That's definitely a situation when violence is the answer. But my point is that, so I'm not just going to say that young people should never engage in any type of violence. But what I'm saying is that they should be intellectual about it. They should be intelligent about it. They should think critically as to whether this is the best course of action. But a lot of people don't know how to judge whether this is the best course of action. They only know how to react emotionally, and they may feel disrespected, or they may feel uncomfortable, or they may feel embarrassed. And because of that, they're like, okay, I'm just going to react. I'm not going to think. I'm not going to think critically, because I don't even know how to think critically in a lot of those situations. A lot of these young people don't know how to think critically in these situations. So what I'm saying is what mathematics does is, and it doesn't mean that just because and this also doesn't mean this, because don't get it misconstrued. It doesn't mean that just because someone does well in mathematics that they're never going to make a mistake, that they're never going to respond emotionally. It may happen. It may still happen because you're still a human being at the end of the day. But what it does is it may lower the chance and the likelihood, because at least you know better. But if you don't even know better, if your brain is not even wired to think that way, and not even to consider alternatives, to consider what the consequences will be, like I mentioned, consequential thinking. All word problems are in any math class. Word problems are just exercises in consequential thinking, because every word problem, what it does is it gives you information about a scenario or a situation. And it says, this is this way, this is this way. Then it asks you the question as the student or the reader, what would happen if this happens based on this information that you know? So when you're in class and you grow up your whole life going through school and you're solving those problems and you're thinking that you're being trained to think in that way. And a lot of times the situations that we find ourselves in become more and more complex. So a lot of times we don't know how to think when there are too many variables. But when you're used to sitting in math classes and it's a whole lot of variables and you got to know how to think and how to attack this problem and how to solve this problem, then hopefully the hope is that when you're in the streets and it's a lot of different variables and a lot going on, you will also be able to apply and transfer that thought process into that real life situation.
Now,
that's the hope.
Does your program implement the cultural aspect or the rationale of being more intellectual opposed to just, I guess, shooting from the hip?
Well, definitely, because these are the conversations that I have when I'm creating my video content and I'm talking about the problems and I'm going through step by step and I'm doing my ad libs like within the video content and I'm saying, like, okay, well, this is what you got to think about. And, I may go off on a tangent and start talking about, why this is this way and why this shouldn't be this way, or how this step in the process is related to this real life situation or this everyday situation. And you mentioned culture. So in a lot of my videos are also infused with Black culture and Black history. A lot of times in my videos, like today, for example, you may not be able to see it, but I have this is my alma mater hoodie, my Morgan State University hoodie. So I may be intentional and wear a Morgan State University hoodie in one of my videos so that, a young brother or a young sister that's watching it will be exposed to historically Black colleges. And I may talk a little bit about Morgan State University, founded in 1867, located in Baltimore, Maryland, one of the best engineering programs in the world. I may talk about that, so, and before we even get into the mathematics lesson, because, it's also in part the reason that I do this for a couple of reasons, well, multiple reasons, but a couple of reasons are we think about how, and we, me and my peers, we used to talk about how when we were growing up in the 80s and in the early 90s, especially, historically Black colleges were promoted very heavily. And then for a very long, then that kind of stopped. And for a very long time, they weren't by the mainstream media. So now they're being promoted again, once again, right, by the mainstream media. But, the thing is, like, what I realized is that we didn't have to wait for the mainstream media to do it. We can do it ourselves. If we want to promote HBCUs, which we should, we could do it ourselves. And especially the more obscure HBCUs, like the HBCUs that that aren't the Howards and the Hamptons and the Morehouses and the Spellmans and the Morgans and the Clark Atlantas, the less well known, more local, smaller scale HBCUs. We can promote them on our own. We can do that. Also, I realized this not too long ago, that a lot of the reason that I, may promote historically Black colleges in my video content or Black history in my video content is because when I grew up listening to, again, hip hop was a major influence. That's what the rappers did. The rappers would, consistently name drop. Some people, they would name drop sometimes more positive people, sometimes not so positive people.
Right.
But the fact still remained that they were name dropping. So on my platform, I like to name drop. So I'm a name drop Patrice Lumumba. I'm a name drop Assata Shakur. I'm a name drop Mary McLeod Bethune. I'm a name drop Amilcar Cabral. So, because these are people that I believe that young people especially should study very in depth and understand their philosophies and their outlooks and, the work that they did to try to make the world a better place. But they're not going to hear about these people in school. It's not going to happen. So, and as opposed to me spending the most of my energy agitating and trying to get schools to mention these people, I'd rather just use my own platform and mention these people and get everybody to know about the YouTube channel and subscribe to the YouTube channel and go use it. So that way it's like, the school can do what the school is going to do. Right. I'm of the opinion, I don't really want to use my energy. I have respect for the people that use their energy to try to get the schools to change. That's not my lane, though. My lane is more so I'd rather just create a separate space where you can come, where you don't got to worry about that. So we're not gonna sit up and have arguments about critical race theory. That's not it. That ain't it. We're not doing that. We're not doing that over here. We don't have time for that. Because when I think about it, in my classrooms, even when I was in the schools, the charter schools, in the traditional public, I was doing critical race theory all the time, I guess. But I just believe in teaching our young people what they need to know so that they can be responsible handlers of power. Like I mentioned earlier, like John Henrik Clarke said. And in order for that to happen, they're going to have to learn about some people that were attempting to gain power in this society and in this world. So that's and it's all connected to math, because the purpose of math is really a tool of liberation. You can excel in math and then go get a good job and get an engineering degree or a computer science degree or go into one of the STEM disciplines or the STEM fields. That's fine. You could do that, but you could also understand with a strong understanding of math, you can then learn those subjects and learn those fields and then create your own opportunities that can also in turn serve your community. Right. So that's why like math is much more than just a subject, much more than just a major in college, more than just a class. It's a way of thinking. It's the science of patterns. It's a language in and of itself. And it's something that our children, definitely need to understand. And we one of the reasons and the ways that we should be able to tell that there is some type of I don't like to use the word conspiracy, but there's nothing coincidental or accidental about the fact that so many of our young people don't excel in mathematics. And the reason is it's not due to their ability. It's due to propaganda around mathematics, because we're consistently told from early that math is hard. We're consistently told that it's hard. So because we're told that it's hard, many of us don't even attempt it. We don't even try it. And the moment that we try it, a lot of us that we try it, we get a wrong answer. We just want to give up.
Right.
But then you have to take
already got it implanted in their head.
Yeah, you got to take a moment and step back and ask yourself, in what other area of life do you try something one time and fail or get a wrong answer and just give it up and just automatically decide that you're not good at it? Like that, I don't know of any other real area where, at least for such a large quantity and percentage of people, where that's a reality. I don't know. So there has to be something going on. Like there's some serious negative propaganda around mathematics to keep us from attempting to excel in this field and in this area. It's just got to be. I'm convinced.
Well, I definitely Appreciate your time, Mr. Parker. Hopefully we definitely can have you again. You definitely opened my eyes up in regards to math, like the whole problem solving thing in regards to, these young men out here, trying to handle situations in the street. Cause I mean, it makes sense. Like what you said definitely makes sense. Um, I definitely want a lot of people to go on to your website, did all this math on YouTube. So that's the tag right there for YouTube. All this math. Mr. Parker is definitely an expert in the field of mathematics and his culture. So please check him out. And bro, if we can have you again, we would definitely love it.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I love to talk about math.
I appreciate it. I
As you can
appreciate
tell.
your time. And you have a wonderful evening. And man, stay encouraged and keep these kids on track in regards to academics.
Appreciate it.
All right, boss. Be cool.
All right.
That was Mr. Akil Parker. He definitely dropped the science down on us in regards to the mathematics and the cultural aspects of it. He hit on a lot of very important points, like I said, in regards to the problem solving techniques with math and the word problems. If these guys could just think, to try to figure that out, try to figure out problems in the streets, try to figure out problems that are your own personal problems. I mean, everything isn't pulling out a gun to resolve your issues. You know what I mean? But like you said, and to defend yourself, sometimes violence is the last resort. You know what I mean? But you definitely want to, have more of a positive impact on yourself, and try to just figure things out. You know what I mean? You want to be a well-rounded, educational, educated, brother or sister. So I definitely, appreciate his time. Um, we do have a youth conference coming up in July 15th. So we definitely want you guys to come out and check that out. It's our second annual youth conference. We'll have it at Bethana Community Center. That's at 25th and Reed. That's in South Philly. So far we got confirmed speakers: Dr. Alfonso Evans, his son Alfonso Evans Jr., up and coming gospel artist. Excuse me, committee woman, side Sage Purple Blackwell. I'm sorry, and we still waiting for one more speaker to confirm. The event will be hosted by Miss Amani Parker. She's a student at Kappa in the dance department, and I'm sure she's going to do a wonderful job in regards to hosting this conference. Also, we have a birthday shout out here. We don't want to miss this one. So today is this young man's birthday. Mr. Damarion Benson. The 14th, March 14th was his birthday. Damarion is 17 years old. We definitely want to give him a shout out on his special day. Like I said, all the encouragement that we can give to these youth. Happy birthday on a podcast, giving these awards, it makes them feel special. You'd be surprised how many children don't feel special, because somebody is saying something as simple to them as happy birthday, or, I love you, or, how was it, these simple things that you would really think that, people, parents would say, but some parents just don't, because they just don't know how to do it. You know what I mean? That wasn't how they was raised. You know what I mean? So they figured that, if it was good enough for them, it's good enough for their kids. But me and my daughter was talking about this book yesterday. It's called The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. And Mr. Ellison was saying that the character that's seeing himself as the invisible man in society is also in a psychological metaphor called the cave. So whatever this person sees in the cave is all that they think is happening. And like whatever's happening in the cave, like it's happening to everybody. You know what I mean? So if these parents are thinking that, well, it's only one type of parenting, then they think everybody is parenting that way, whatever they see in their cave. And that's not necessarily true. Now, you can be a better parent if you venture past your own cave. You know what I mean? So we definitely want that to happen. We have a little segment coming up. And give me a moment here for a second here. We're waiting for my daughter to come in. I sent her the email with the link. So the link is in the email. So we just waiting for her to, to sign in. And she's going to do a moment in women's history with Ambrielle. So substituting for Ambrielle will be Amani, the host of our conference. So we're going to wait for her to log in and, get this rolling for her. I really want to thank you guys truly from the bottom of my heart. You guys really come through in regards to, watching this podcast. Some of you guys do support the foundation, in regards to that. And sometimes it takes a lot, to have that happen. You know what I mean? So like I said, I just want to thank you guys again for just coming through and being a part of this foundation. This great work. You know what I mean? So, because we really just want to help these kids out. And it's not so much about the awards that we give out or even the guests that we have on here. We try to get some fancy people to come on, to impress you guys or whatever like that. But it's way more than that for me. I want you guys to, get the skills needed to be better parents. You know what I mean? Along with the lessons that Mr. Park is teaching in regards to mathematics, and it applies, applying culture in regards to that. You guys have to have a sense to want that information, to want to know how to solve problems. You know what I mean? And some of us don't. Education is very key. Like he said, just like with Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history, was saying that, education is key for the Negro, to achieve in society. You know what I mean? He talks about that in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. I believe that's the name of it. But it's very key that you guys obtain education. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes you might, you might hit it big, or you might take over a parent's company, or you might become the next Michael Jordan, but the next Michael Jordan is a 1 in a billion shot. They're not picking Michael Jordans every year out of the draft. They're not even picking LeBron Jameses out of the draft like that. You know what I mean? And even the guys that have the potential to be the next Michael Jordan, they don't have the mental concept to solve problems, to stay on track. So they won't be a problem to society. Right now we're looking at a situation with John Morant where he's trying to get himself back together so he can get back to his team and help that team to better excel, to excel, in the NBA. It's a very tricky situation when you um don't have the focus necessary or the mental concept necessary to be all you can be as a person. And I know I come on here and I talk about parenting a lot, and because I want you guys to get it. I mean, it's not the whole society, whole inner city community. And it ain't all black people. And the inner city is very diverse. I mean, the majority is blacks. Then you may have Asians or Hispanics or whites. You know what I mean? But it's diverse. And within that diversity, you have percentages of people that are ignorant in regards to parenting. I'm not saying I'm an expert, because even the information that I get, or I post things on this parenting forum, I have to research that because this is very serious to me. Posting those scholar of the months, the educator of the months, everything. All that's very serious to me. And I wanted to be serious to you. So, without further ado, we are going to go to our next segment. And this is hold on here. This is a moment. Oop, that's my mom. That's not the next segment. It's definitely not Tucker Carlson. So anyway, it's a moment in women's history with Ambrielle Parker, and here to substitute for Ambrielle is Miss Amani Parker. Amani, how are you? Your microphone is muted there. Let me see if I can unmute it. You gotta take the mute button off there. Yeah, dude. So one more time, you just muted it again. Yeah, you move over a little bit. We can only see half your face. You keep muting that button. All right, let me see if I can take it off. Hold on, I got you. All right, let me see. Oh, just you gotta unmute it yourself. It's saying it's not letting me do it. You might have to try to come out and go back in. I don't know what's going on with it. I'm gonna remove her there. So we're going to let me see.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. We can hear you now there. Yeah, let's move over a tad bit. We can only see half your face there.
I don't know. I'm not technology whiz.
All right, but we appreciate it. We appreciate it. So, today Amani will be discussing trying to get rid of this thing here. Her grandmother, Miss Victoria Martin. If I can pull it up, hold on here. Give me a second. All right, bet there we go. All right. So she will be discussing her grandmother, Miss Victoria Martin. So without further ado, Amani Parker will be doing a moment in history with Ambrielle Parker, and Amani is substituting for Ambrielle. So here we go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amani, and today's discussion topic for this week's Women in History is Miss Victoria Martin. Victoria Martin was born December 25th, 1957, and she is the eldest of 8 brothers and sisters. She was born and raised in West Philadelphia, and she attended West Philadelphia High, where she graduated. She is the mother of 3 beautiful girls and the grandmother to 5 grandkids. and a plethora of nieces and nephews. She also has 7 brothers and sisters. Victoria is a miracle to her family and to everyone that knows her. She has overcome many struggles in life recently, overcoming a coma, which she was in for approximately 3 weeks. Now, despite all odds, she persevered, and her strength and resilience shines within her and throughout her family. And on today's day in women history, we honor you, Victoria, for your strength, and your resilience is inspiring and encouraging to many women, including me. And we just thank you and we love you. And that's Victoria Martin.
Thank you so much, Amani, for today's moment in women's history. We definitely love you for that one. And thank you for your time. We'll hopefully see you at Hamburg next week. So thanks again. And I appreciate you, coming in and sharing that with us. All right. Take care. Well, guys, that's definitely it for me. We'll amend it over time. Next week we will have Gerald Harriet in regards to the topic caught up. So you don't want to miss that. Check our Facebook page out, for the flyer in regards to that day. And thank you for tuning in. God bless and good night.